It's nice to see you all today. Thank you so much, Tim, for the invitation. Thank you to UCSB, Susan, all the rest of the organizers, to SBCC as well for making this project possible. So my name is Shea Hughes. I am with Scale Microgrids, and I'm here to talk about the SBCC Community Resilience Hub. Scale Microgrids is a national distributed energy technology developer, owner, and operator. And we have a heavy focus in California as well as the Northeast. We really try to bring distributed energy technologies where they're needed the most for resiliency and affordability and sustainability. So why Santa Barbara? We have heard quite a bit about that already. Santa Barbara is heaven on earth, right? But it's also the natural disaster capital, some say, of the country. FEMA rates it 99.4% on the natural disaster scale, which I'm not sure how high that goes, but it doesn't sound good. The Thomas Fire is quite literally the reason why I am standing here today and why I have a job at Scale. The Thomas Fire, subsequently the Camp Fire, were two of the main reasons that Tim Hayde decided to bring his company, Scale Microgrids, to California to try to help solve this problem, right? We need more resilient infrastructure in this state and in this community desperately. It was, as Supervisor Cap said, it was the largest fire in state history at the time. Now it barely cracks the top 10, just in the last 7 years. I'm sure there are deeply personal stories from people in this room and it's something that you guys will never forget. But as a society, we do tend to forget. I'm from Florida, and last year, 7-8 months ago, we had two of the worst hurricanes in generations that affected my town. Less than 6 months later, people are rebuilding their homes in exactly the same places. The Thomas Fire, the response was a massive operation, right? It was 8,500 firefighters at its peak. Over 100,000 people were displaced. And we are here to help essentially figure out ways to make those operations and those logistics more seamless and more effective in the future. So how are we going to do that? One of the ways that Scale can do this is, we can deploy microgrids at critical sites to provide resources for vulnerable communities and just in general the community at large, first responders. This type of project is kind of down the middle of the fairway in terms of typical projects for Scale. This is a 100% clean energy microgrid, several megawatts of solar, rooftop and carport, 6 megawatt hours of energy storage, and then the brains of it is the switchgear and controls that essentially allows the system to become a microgrid and disconnect from the main grid and continue operations at about 70% of business as usual indefinitely for the campus. Let's see. So I love that I get to do what I do because there's a lot of benefits for a lot of different stakeholders. This project works because it works for SBCC first and foremost, right? This is something that in blue sky conditions provides a real value add to their operations. It lowers their energy costs. It helps them meet their sustainability goals. It provides, educational opportunities for students. But when emergencies do strike, this becomes a resource not only for them to continue their operations, but also for the community at large. So this site helps reduce the strain on SoCal Edison's grid by 500 kilowatts. It provides, a place for vulnerable populations to go and receive support and shelter kind of during emergencies. And in fact, SBCC is already partnered with the Red Cross and Santa Barbara County. And the other thing that we're doing is we're partnered with IBEW, who I believe is here, and providing workforce development and green jobs, transition to green jobs. There are, of course, a lot of challenges with a project like this. I wouldn't be here today if this project was kind of sailing through and there weren't challenges, so we're here to talk a lot about those this afternoon. One of those challenges is always funding for these types of projects. Fortunately, we did receive funding from the CEC to the tune of about $4.2 million for this grant. That funding has been awarded but not dispersed because ultimately the source is the federal government. And as we know, there are challenges with disbursements of funds from the federal government right now. So funding is a challenge. Tax credits that these projects rely on are also, a potential issue. And so one of the topics that we'll discuss this afternoon is how do we catalyze this ecosystem to come up with more creative funding models from public-private sector to essentially keep these projects moving in the absence of federal support. The other aspect of this is regulatory, right? We have a hard time in California building the things that we all say that we want to build. And that's something that is a real opportunity area for us here in Santa Barbara to come together with like-minded people and figure out how to fast-track these problems and projects and cut the red tape. So this is, close to home for a lot of reasons for me as well. I live in LA, just drove up this morning. And, as soon as I got back into town from my holiday break this past year, I was in the office the next day, and I looked out the window with my colleague Tim Victor here, and we looked up at the start of the Palisades fire. And due to the winds that were forecasted, we knew that was, going to end up as a terrible tragedy, and we were not prepared for it, right? So LA, cities across the country, everyone is grappling with how do we come up with a blueprint to be more prepared for when this happens. And as you've heard from Tim, Supervisor Capps, and others, Santa Barbara is the right sandbox to make that happen, right? In addition to having having the need be very acute in this community, we have the resources, we have the people. It seems like everyone is just a phone call away from each other. It's a small enough community where we can all get in a room and really try to solve problems. And so that's what I'm excited about for today, for this afternoon, for the future, is for us to pick up all the pieces that Tim laid out, put those pieces together, and solve some problems.